Hey folks, this is Totally and welcome to some more game dev. We're back again, working on infinite retries to defeat the Demon Lord. Last week we did some ambient sound effect work, which I thought was actually pretty self-contained. Came in with like a goal of having like some ambient sound effects playing as the player walked around the environment. Got that up and running. Kind of just got it all set up and working in one stream, or technically two streams. But pretty happy about that. Today we're going to be looking at some skill items, hopefully something similar where we can kind of have one set idea that we can start with a plan and execute and have it all finished by the end of the day. So what's the plan? Well, when we go into our skill tree right now, we have to spend skill points that you earn by leveling up your abilities, primarily through using them in combat. And once you've leveled them up, then you can spend those skill points to upgrade the nodes, to make yourself stronger, to increase the power of that specific ability, as well as to have kind of other side effects. But that system feels like it's lacking some sort of extra gating mechanism. Well, it's not true. I feel like realistically this system is working like correctly in that like I can gain skill points to upgrade stuff, but I'm having a struggle to figure out what else to put into the world. And this is kind of like a somewhat prototypey idea that I'm not sure is going to work, but I want to give it a try and see what happens. It does look like we are having a image fail to load. Oh, interesting. Multiple keys with the same name. I've not seen that before. Where does this live, this object? I'm going to quickly see if I can figure this out, and if it becomes too much of a rabbit hole, we'll leave it. But this prop, is it on the actual... It's been cleared. Interesting. Let's turn off... Some weirdness is going on in general too. Decor. Interesting. So we're looking, I want to see if I can solve this, but basically there is a prop that should be appearing here, which is the Goddess Realm scrying pool, which looks like it should be under the marble section. So if we go into here, go to marble, scrying pool, that is failing. Okay, I think this is actually just bad setup. I think there was something we did last week right before we started the stream, yeah, where I accidentally hit create props on an empty folder, and I think that caused some really weird behaviors with our prop loading system, and we fixed it in the last stream, but I guess this is the first time using a Goddess Realm prop. So if I ever hit create, that means I have to go through and recreate each folder manually. I'm gonna write that down separately as a bug that I want to look into at a later time. But okay, back on track. So where was I? The short version is that I'm just going to be experimenting with this idea of making it so that you need specific items to unlock specific types of nodes, similar to like Final Fantasy X's like stat node system, where you need certain types of sphere grid items in order to unlock certain parts of the sphere grid. I'm going to be playing around with that idea, mostly just to give me something else to give the player item-wise, so that we have more potential drops or loot that we can hide around corners. That all being said, we need to figure out how we add a new item. So we're going to start there. It's been a while since I've done anything with the items. I think we did a stream a couple months back now where we hooked up some simple chess logic, I think we did. But I haven't really touched it since. If we go into W01... yeah, there's these concept of an interactable that would have data for what item you were picking up and the amount of that item you were going to get. Interesting. So let's start by grabbing this, going back to our combat grounds. And we're going to put this in here as kind of like a test space. So we add this in here. Save that and hit run. We should be able to see that we can walk up and get a piece of armor. I just want to see the old functionality or the existing functionality before we modify it. So we come up to here. Okay, so we have a banner that comes up with the name of the item, as well as Hero has a bit of dialogue saying loot, which is probably unnecessary, but I understand why I set that up. Let's take a look at the item pickup cutscene. What is this doing? So this is a ability. Okay, this is what's allocating the display above Hero's head that says the name of the item, found a display name of that item. And then trigger cutscene, generic reusable cutscene. Interesting. We add the item. I'm going to assume that this is actually adding the item to our inventory. Yeah, if we follow that line, I'm going to guess that's all that is. And then adjust the walkability of that tile. Interesting. I'm not sure this is being used. Because it looks like it's set to none by default. Oh, but some of this might be getting populated. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is empty, so this stuff is getting populated probably by the interact. Because we have some of the same information, tile type, the flag. Okay. So item pickup cutscene is a very simple ability that has no real information about what you're picking up, but then I'm going to guess something populates all of these ability effects, is what I did on stream a while ago, and I have forgotten. Or at least, like, mostly forgotten. I vaguely remember doing this. Okay. So then, it just needs... I just want to figure out where is the cutscene part coming up where Hero says loot. Is that this? So this is a repeatable cutscene. which just has one sequence step, which is starting the dialogue loot. Interesting. So I guess technically speaking, I'm like trying to decide like how would I remove this if we wanted to try just experimenting with this being not here. Where here doesn't say anything on pickup, but instead just gets the loot, and we only do the top banner. If I wanted to try that, let's make a new version of this. And inside of here, we'll tell it to use this simple version instead. And inside the simple one, I can't just disable this. Normally we could just turn off any step and it wouldn't apply. But because this is part of a more, like, this is part of a cutscene base prefab, this is a variant of it. It has this like player only and cutscene ability effects. These targeting pieces are needed in order for the system to work. So if we turn this off, these scripts would also get disabled. We could replace them and add them elsewhere though. Yeah, because I don't think these care about the specific ability effect they're added on. They just need to be below. So we're gonna say player only. And also cutscene ability effect. Cutscene ability effect target. Does that need any additional information? Interesting. That looks different. Oh. This one requires the cutscene. So in theory then, we could potentially not have this one. We only really need the player only. But we also have this required effects at flag one. That one I do think we need. Required flag component. Required flag ability effect. Target. That's just a bunch of words. Just a word salad. Alright. So in theory then, we could delete this. Does this function? That's the question. This should get rid of the dialogue. The other option is we could make a cutscene that just has no dialogue and use the base version and just give it a no dialogue entry. That still showed it. Cutscene simple item pickup cutscene is the ability it should be using. And that should not have a cutscene trigger in it anymore. Interesting. How did that still... Did I not hit save? Maybe that's it. I may not have hit save, so the data wasn't updated. Okay, cool. So that worked, but there's one fundamental problem, which is that it didn't wait for us to put in an input. So I guess I was using the dialogue system as a way of holding the player in place and holding the information above the player's head about what item they picked up until they hit A to move through the dialogue. This shouldn't be a hard thing to replicate though, because I believe we have a sequence step for this. So wait for player input. I just don't think we have a ability effect for that. Before I create one, I'm going to double check. So if we look at, let's go find player input sequence step. Yeah, player input sequence step. So if we look for this one's constructors, we have a reaction sequence step. I don't know where this is used. I have no memory of this. Oh, this is for the combo system I was prototyping. Okay. Cool, but not what we're looking for. So yeah, so this is only used as part of the reaction system. That's wild. I thought I had done this at some point earlier. Player input wait. No, there's only the one. Okay, well at least there is a sequence step for this. So we need an ability effect that'll wrap that. So I think that makes sense to be in... Let's minimize this so we can read more easily. Under effects, we have board effects, combo effects, cutscene effects, damaging effects, finding, healing, hit, item-related stuff, move, progress, property-related, screen effects, user feedback, and utility. What is user feedback right now? This is stuff like hiding an item, flashing a sprite, changing the exposure. So these are all like effects that are like changing the environment. Again, user feedback. So I feel like wait on players' input is not exactly what we're looking for here. It's not in a utility. I'm going to put it in the cutscene effects for now because I'm not sure when else I would use this other than in a set cutscene, like picking up an item or in a specific moment where the player is going to need to be able to read or take a moment to assess the situation before moving on. So like short version is I think a cutscene is the right spot for it. Wait on player input ability effect. So this is just going to add a wait on player input ability effect, and I don't believe this had any constructor. Wait on ability, player input, wait sequence step is what it was called. Okay, so we're just going to add one of these as part of this ability effect. Very straightforward. It's just basically a ability effect that's wrapping a sequence step. And then that goes on here. Remove this one. Now we should be able to walk up, get the information about the item we're picking up, and the game won't progress until we basically press the A button. Cool. Easy. So I'm going to go with that simple version for today. And then we're going to figure out how we add an item. Let's go to items. Lots of sound effects for items, but we're looking for the TSV or the JSON file. Why am I not finding that? So let's go into design data. Let's close out all these scripts. So this is all of our TSVs that get turned into JSON files. I am not seeing one for items. I feel like I have lost my mind a little bit because I'm positive that we have the ability to import items. Have we never done this for Infinite Retries? Only for Heir of Embers? Even here we don't have an items JSON. We definitely have a parser for this, though. Okay, we do have an item parser. Yeah, we've never set one up for Infinite Retries. I guess that makes sense because, again, we don't really have many, or we don't have any items built into the design for this game yet. So let's take a look at the item parser that Heir of Embers was using. Game data items, yeah. Sorry, so let me just open that in Visual Studio so it's a little bit easier, or VS Code so it's a little bit easier to read. Not perfect. But yeah, this is basically the item ID, the name in English, the tag associated with it, what kind of currency it can be purchased for, sold for, the default number of that item, I'm guessing. Yeah, lots of information. Let's see if we can bring that up in the... Let me just track this down. Yeah, okay, so this is that list, but in a spreadsheet readable. Yeah, this has a bunch of data associated with it, which makes sense because these were originally much more complicated because Heir of Embers was more of a traditional kind of like Final Fantasy kind of experience, like a less of a tactical game and more of a explore the world in a party of team members. Okay, so I'm just trying to parse what's happening here. So these things have string type value. It looks like it can have any number of these. So a potion was an item, and then we would import its particle string healing effect. Description string heal 5. Stat string HP. HP integer 5. So this data is getting read into a tool that Unity had in its packages. I have a fairly old version of it, but Game Foundation's inventory, this is getting read into this system, and under the mutable properties, all of those things we were just seeing are added here as mutable properties of that item. So we can add as many mutable properties as we want, as long as we have them in that format in the spreadsheet. Sorry, stand by. Oh, weird. Okay, I don't know what was going on there. Yeah, so as long as we have them in this format, we can have as many or as few mutable format or mutable properties to an item that we want. Okay, so this also makes sense why there isn't a Era of Embers, like why there's only an Era of Embers version of this, because there isn't really a way of having two sets of Game Foundation item datas in the same project. So we haven't really run into this problem before, but this is going to be a hard divergence. Up until now, technically speaking, we should be able to go back to Era of Embers by loading up its scenes and be able to walk around and do all the stuff. I have not tested that in a long time, so there's a good chance that I have broke it. But the idea was always that there was like a core set of like RPG functions that could work for both games. And when I stopped working on Era of Embers and moved over to Infinite Retries, we basically took all of the core logic and tried to separate it as much as possible out so that it could be reused for both projects, which was an interesting exercise to make sure that like I was building stuff that was truly like independent, and was not heavily built to be specific to one project. But in this situation, because we're using Game Foundations as like our backend for our inventory system, we won't be able to keep the original. I guess we could keep these original items and add to it the Infinite Retry ones, but we just never use these ones. And then when I go to like make a build for Infinite Retries, I just need to remove these. It's not ideal, but let's say that's the plan for now, because it kicks the bucket down the road. So let's add some items here. So we're going to add, I'm going to break it down more, but we're going to start with skill node. Let's just make skill node 1, and we'll call this skill. Call it a crystal shard. This will be a consumable. What does that mean? Oh, it's up to me, isn't it? Yeah. Where do we find the tags? Game Foundation tags. Ah, we can have any tag we want. Oh, and these are used as part of the transaction system as well. So we can have transactions which are like, this is the buy and sell cost for this item. And then I think we can also have stores. And then we can have different stores have different item transactions. Okay. And I was basically taking all of that database and recreating it in spreadsheets because I found that more easy to process. Okay, so let's say that these crystal shards are consumable because they are technically an item you'll be spending to upgrade your skill tree. In terms of purchase cost, it really doesn't matter because we're not going to be doing anything with these in terms of stores. So this data doesn't matter, but we need to input it. And then for static props, let's just say 0 to start. And then I'm going to download that TSV. We're going to have to go to... Sorry, one second. I have to go find the Era of Embers TSV folder, and we're going to save over the item TSV. And then if we look in here, this should now be updated. Where'd VS Code go? Yeah, so now there's a new entry that we've just downloaded. And if we come into our parser and run this, ooh, it failed. It failed to find that file. Interesting. JRPG assets, content, design data, TSVs. The JRPG assets does... Oh. Wow. It has been a long time since I've run this script then. Content, design data, TSVs. Content, design data, TSVs. Okay, so that should be correct now. What else is going to break when we try and import? Okay, it failed to find currencies. So there's multiple folder paths in here that are wrong. Interesting. Still failing. Yeah, it's all to do with folder path stuff. And this doesn't exist here anymore. So where did this get moved to? This now exists inside of Unity Assets, Game Foundations. Okay. Assets, Unity Assets, Game Foundations. This also means technically we could parse it into a different location? Where does this get referenced? Can we have two setups? Okay, maybe we can have a separate version for infinite retries. What did that do? Nope, didn't do what I thought it was going to do. Okay. So if we do runtime settings, that's this file. And if we, this is going to be the database one. Okay. So if we copy this then, call this IT database, and we say we want to point to this version instead. Save that, and then do the same commands inventory. It still opens. So then instead of writing to the JRPG database, if we write to the IT database, this should allow us to keep a kind of existing version. This is all kind of like a little bit unnecessary in some regards, because I do feel like at some point if we were to go back to Era of Embers, we probably wouldn't just pick back up in the same way, but maybe we would. I guess we'd probably start with like the existing project. Yeah, it's just so many improvements we've made with infinite retries that going backwards feels weird, but I guess the whole point is that we should try and find a way to genericize those improvements so that they can be used across both games and any future games we might want to make. Inventory. Okay, that worked. So we have the crystal shard there. So if we go back in here and just swap it to this database, and then where are we here? This one doesn't have it. Okay, cool. Very cool. So if that's the case, that means we can make another version of item parser that is specific to this project, which has different file paths. So if we come into here, there should already be a parser folder. Parsers. We're going to bring in the item parser. At the root level, what is our asset folder? Infinite retries assets. Okay. So now look here instead for each of these TSV parsers. Okay, so now we can have our own version of the data that's different. Fair amount of setup today. I was not anticipating this amount. Unlockable characters. I'm sorry I did not see the hydrate. That was from 10 minutes ago. Kind of just in the zone and going. So I want to modify the original item parser that we had found at first. We're in the original. Okay. So we want to leave this one like this. Am I wrong? Oh, I am wrong. This is the new one. Okay. Yeah, so this one's set up this way, and then we want to go find the other item parser, which is going to be here. And this one goes back to its original name, which we don't have the save for. Wrong visual. Okay. So this one is still the JRPG database. It's still in the JRPG area, and it's still using all the same TSVs. But then the new one, which will be the IT version, will go to the IT database, and we'll go find game data items, currencies, and shops. So we're going to go grab those TSVs, and we're going to bring those over and put them in the right folder. Content, design data, TSVs, we need items, shops, and currencies. We're going to copy all three of those, and we're going to bring those over to the TSV folder, paste those in, and now if we run IT tools IT item parser, it should do the same thing. So let's test that. Let's open back up this. Let's remove these old entries. I guess if we remove these, we're kind of breaking everything. Do I want to do that right now? Because we'll have to go in and modify the shops and currencies. Okay, I'm not going to do that right this second, but in theory, we should be able to set this up completely differently, and it should function. Cool. So we've separated out the item systems so that we have our own version for infinite retries, which I'm surprised we have not done. But again, this is kind of what I'm getting at, is the whole reason I want to add like items to the skill node unlocks is because I'm just missing items. The way that we've designed the Omni weapon as like this thing that absorbs all your skills and lets you use all your abilities as a single character means that you don't really have the same JRPG mechanics of like finding a new sword, finding a new armor, and like working with those. So I don't know, it's just something about that seems like it's giving us a lot of difficulty finding meaningful rewards to give the player at the end of like dead ends or even on defeating an enemy. So now we have these crystal shards that we can drop. So if we come into here and we do crystal shards, what was the ID I gave that? It was skill node _1. So if we give that in here, save, and then walk up, we should be able to see it say found crystal shard if we've entered the data correctly. Walk up, found crystal shard. Okay. Now what happens if we make this a 2 and then walk up? Do we have any text for that? How smart was I when I set this up? It just says crystal shard. Okay. See, I would have guessed, or I would have thought I remember... I have this vague memory of setting it up to say like times number, but honestly that could have been a previous... time. All right, so the amount isn't here. This is the moment where we are setting up all the additional information. So this is adding an item of amount. So it is going to add the correct amount, but it's not telling the player how many they've received. So we want to go into whatever ability effect is showing whatever's showing the information to us. Show item. Oh, it has access to the other ability effect. Okay, I see how I set this up. So it says found. Oh, if item amount is great. Okay, I did set this up. Interesting. Oh, I never hit save. Wow, I've been bad at that today. I've not run into that problem a lot in the last few weeks, but today, that's twice now that I've just not hit the save button. And then I think it's a bug. Okay, so I do remember setting this up. So found crystal shards ×2. Cool. So that is really all I wanted to start with, was make sure that that was working. That took almost an hour. But there was a little bit more maintenance that we had to do than I was anticipating. So next step, we want to go into the skill screen, which is going to be this one. And we're going to want to make it so that these nodes are going to need to have a specific item associated with them in order for them to be purchased. And then if you have that item and you purchase it, it should subtract one of those items from your inventory. I don't think we need to add that directly to the data though. In theory, everything we know about what the node is should be enough for us to determine which item we want to use. Right now we've only set up one. So I guess, yeah, if I take a step back, we should just hook it up with the one item, and then we can figure out how to diversify so that you need like specifically a strength crystal shard versus a defense crystal shard to get specific nodes. We can figure out that later, but for the time being, let's just get it hooked up. So in order to buy these, you'll need to have skill nodes. Well, you'll need to have the crystal shards, and each time you unlock a node, it reduces the crystal shards you have by 1. Let's just do that. Attempt purchase node. So this checks to see if you have the number of skill points that that node costs, or if you're holding the left control button. So in here, we can add a extra bit of call, which is an... Ooh, this gets tricky. How do we contact Game Foundations here? We need to grab the catalog and then find the item. Oh, this is only for getting information about that item. The actual add part was somewhere else. Interesting. I'm going to do a quick search for amount. This is the logic. Okay. Yeah, inventory manager, create item. Such a weird kind of setup. I wouldn't think that that's how you would do this, but it seems like that is the call. Okay. So if we want to know how many we have, again, I think this data I'm putting in will eventually come from the node itself, or at least be determined based off the node's type. But let's just add this directly here. So create the item of this name. Get the requirement item, get its property amount. We're not modifying it, at least not yet. Oh, weird. So here we're doing amount as a property. Oh, it would be the same thing here. And this is just plussing to property. It's because it's var, it's more confusing in this setup. But yeah, you can just add an amount to it. But does that mean I can just like use it as an integer? I don't think so. I guess I can, if greater than. Yeah, that would be a property. Okay. Weird. So from here we can do if greater than 0. And then we can build directly in here. -1, and then we'd want to actually, where's that really nice, yeah, this reduce item count number. We'd want to do amount minus equal 1. If it's greater than 0, then set the required items amount. Otherwise, remove the item. I think that might just be it. This is all for attempt to purchase. I also want to have some similar setup, I'm sure. For whether or not the icon should be lit up. Oh, do we not do that actually? I guess we don't. We don't show a difference between whether or not something is purchasable or not purchasable. We might want to change that. Yeah, so if we come in here and look at this, this is available, but I can't purchase it. Why was it spamming item added? How did we get there? Interesting. So every time I push the button, it's creating that item. Okay. And that's some callback stuff we had set up with an initial test environment, which is good. So if we look in our inventory, we only have one. Oh, but we have a lot of versions. Okay, so create item isn't the right setup then. There must be another way of doing this. Let's do a find on amount again. So here, we're reducing its count on an item, which I'm not seeing how this is getting set. This is getting its definition, which is different from getting an instanced item that's been created. Get inventory item. Ah, this is the call we're missing. Item. Interesting. Is this all... This is part of core. Cool. Okay. So then... Did I ever set this up fully? It looks like I did. Oh, cool. Okay. So in Heir of Embers, we had a system for creating items and equipping them. This is some old code. This is from like 3 years ago? Maybe closer to 4. I love sometimes just like doing archaeology on my own like code stuff. It's just neat finding stuff and being like, I did write this, didn't I, for the equipment screen that we had. So this was used as part of the item factory, and the item factory could create an item. This was part of add equipment as part of the initial setup for that unit. So yeah, so we had a system set up where you could, I would like default add a couple items to your inventory, and then I would let you go into the equipment screen and equip new items based off of the selection you made. Cool. Okay, and this is part of core? This is in the core folder structure? It is. Okay, so this is just something I can use without having to port it. So so what does this do? It's basically just a static function inside a class that if I give it an inventory item, which an inventory item is specifically, I think, Game Foundation's name for an item. That's not going to help me. Yeah. If I give it an inventory item, it will see if it can find that item in the list of the factory. If it can't, if it can, it'll just return it. If it can't, then it'll initialize a new item with that definition. which allows us to much more easily increase and decrease the amounts. Okay, this was not stress tested, it doesn't look like. It was set up for one specific setup and not really repurposed anywhere. But I like the idea. Not sold on having a static dictionary in here. I don't know if I like this design pattern, but I can think about that. But for now, let's see if we can use it. So the real problem still becomes, how do we get an item? I still feel like this doesn't solve it. The problem we're actually running into is we have to do this create item call. I want to see an example of where we're not doing create, but ideally there's some sort of get item. Find item by definition. Oh, this is part of the test store. Okay. I see. Okay. Sorry, processing. So the problem with this setup is we still need to do this call and this logic every time. So I feel like we're still missing a get item call by ID. And I think this one should do the same thing the test store was doing, which is this call. Well, it's actually that whole section of code. Okay. And then in here, it's going to do a This is still not quite right. The problem... Trixie with the hydrate. Honestly, I could use a second. Okay. So... if we say we want to get item, we want to find that item by ID. We're then going to check the item. Got it. Okay. I'm going to type it up and then I'm going to think this out real quick. But I believe this should work. So this would be a nice helper function using the find items by definition. So if we use this inventory factory, we can get item by ID. We give it the ID in a string form, and then internally it can use create item to either return the item it finds in its already existing list of items, or it can create a new item class, which is our personal item that's part of our system. And then this would make it so that we never need to actually touch the inventory manager like the Game Foundation's code is the hope. So we give it an ID, we get back an item, which is our class, and then that item we can increase or decrease its amount, and that'll use all the Game Foundation's stuff, but it won't actually require us to even have an inventory item to begin with, which I think is the problem with some of these early iterations, is we still had to do some setup to get an inventory item, which in reality we just want to work with the IDs. We don't want to have this object ever be accessible outside of the item factory and the item. All this cares about, like all the actual core gameplay should care about, is our version of item, and that way if we ever want to replace Game Foundations with our own internal code, we could replace all of the stuff in these functions and it would be isolated. We wouldn't have to go find inventory items all throughout the code. Yeah. Okay, this is the right way to do it. This is the encapsulation I'm looking for. So then if we go all the way back to the skill screen, I'm just going to hit back a couple of times until we find it. It might take a while. Here, now instead of what we were doing before, we can do item factory dot get item by ID, give it this ID as the item we want to get. We get back a item class. From here we take this item. Can we do item dot get? We can't get type. Okay, so this is missing a pretty key piece of functionality, which is to get the amount. So we can increase and we can decrease the amount, but we also want to be able to just get the amount. Get item amount. Okay. And this wants to do the same setup here. I'm going to replace this with property. What is it? Okay. Going to get rid of some of these old vars, because then this becomes more clear that we can't just return amount, I don't think. Oh, it's smart enough. Cool. Okay, and this becomes a public function. Oh, we had only hooked up the equip and unequip version. That's interesting. So when we equip it, we decrease the amount of item you have in your inventory. And then when you unequip it, we increase the number of that item in your inventory. I don't know if I like that, but let's say that's fine. On consume, we can decrease. And I guess technically then what this becomes is a can consume. Maybe that's better. So we can do a, if the amount to consume is less than or equal to the amount that we have in our inventory, then we can say that we can consume this item. Maybe that's a better encapsulation here. Rather than getting the exact number we have out, we can just check whether or not we can consume that amount. I don't know if I love it. It's also weird because in this particular situation, we're just checking for can consume 1. I do like that this all goes away and it just becomes item consume. So we're checking to see if we have enough skill node items. If we have at least one we can consume, then we come into here, and as long as we weren't holding left control for our debug, then we consume that item. And then we don't have to know anything about Unity's Game Foundations engine or its database stuff at all. We don't have to touch any of its classes. Okay. And this should get rid of creating a whole bunch of variations of it just by clicking the button to check whether or not we have enough. Honestly, haven't touched any of this stuff in a while, so I'm curious to see if this works. Open our inventory. I did not. Interesting. Find item by definition failed. That's fascinating because that seems to be implying, are we loading the wrong database? How did we create an item in the first place? Because we were calling create item and that was working, because we were spamming a bunch of those. Test store. Game Foundations initialize on success, on fail. Oh, neat. What does that do? Is this like a tutorial? Oh, that's neat. That's a video from 5 years ago on using Game Foundations from Unity. I'm not going to spend time digging into that right now. We're just going to figure it out by doing, but... So this is doing initialize. This should be initializing the right database. So if we go into here, that was my only thought, is maybe we were initializing the wrong one. But if we go to runtime settings, we are using the old one. Crystal shard. Although I think both of them should have it at this point, because technically we copied this one and we didn't remove it. Oh no, it doesn't. Okay. Actually, did it reset back to the JRPG database when we hit run? Okay, it's able to add it through the debug system. Did I just type in the name wrong? Was it a copy and paste problem? Skill node 1. Skill node 1. Capitals. Skill node 1. Okay. Let's see if we can walk through what's happening here. Maybe I wrote some bad code in the item factory? So if we come up to here, we try and buy this node, it's going to come here and attempt to purchase it. It's going to go into the item factory. It's going to try and find an item with that ID. It's going to find none. So did we hit an error already? I don't think we did. We can't really check, but I'm not seeing anything. So it wasn't actually on the find item by definition that we failed. If item does not equal null, it should do the second half, but it won't. So it's going to come into here. Oh, we still need to initialize the item with a definition, but at this point we don't have one yet. Because this system assumes you've already created it ahead of time, but the way that we're kind of reworking it, it shouldn't need to. So at this point, if we find it's null, just to keep backwards compatibility, we're going to say if this is null, then we need to create one. Okay, I did not fully think this part through. And what we have to do is we have to do inventory manager dot create item. Just checking to see if there's already functions that kind of do what I'm doing here. Am I recreating the wheel? It's possible. The thing though is at some point we're going to need to call create because it needs one added to the inventory. Whoa, okay. I don't know why it opened Unity like that. I think because I clicked on something in a way I did not intend. So at this stage, we do not have the item. I guess we can do it up here. Yeah, this works. Okay. So if we find that there wasn't an item with that ID you're trying to find, the first thing we do is create one and then pass it into the factory to build us an item class to wrap around it. Because it'll find that it is, we won't need this check anymore. It'll find that it's not in our dictionary of items, aka it hasn't been wrapped yet. And then we come into here, we make a new item class. we initialize that new item class with the definition of the item we just created, and then we add that inventory item ID and the new item to our dictionary. So in the future, we will find this one definition. And all of this is basically because we are circumventing a part of this game foundation system that I don't like. Which I should probably revisit. Like, I don't know, I feel like I'm doing a lot of work because past me decided that we wanted to have this amount property to track the amount of an item that you had. And as I'm building it now, I'm starting to realize I think I may have just fundamentally misunderstood the setup. Because I think the idea is that you would add an item and I think what they intend is that you keep adding items. Like if you want to have more of these items, you keep adding more. But the problem I couldn't figure out was then I couldn't determine how many I had of this item. Like if I wanted to know how many crystal shard items I had, there wasn't a great way of tracking that. So I added the amount and made it so that this value was the thing that I track instead. Okay, and that is not creating multiples anymore. I think the problem I'm going to run into, though, is that if I start using the store system for transactions, when I do a transaction of buying an item, that's not going to increment my amount value. That's going to increment another instance of that item. Yeah. I think there's a fundamental redesign here I might want to be doing. And this is all because I couldn't find a way to get the amount. I guess that's supposed to be done like this. Find items by definition. So we give it an ID and it gives us back a list, and then we could check the count here. And the length of this list is the amount of items that I have. Right, and so what's weird about this system is the whole idea that each item is its own variation. Yeah, so this is like a definition of an item. But you could have multiple instances of that item. But what's weird about that to me is that I feel like if you have a potion, it's a potion. I don't want multiple instances of potions. I want a potion. And so like having a bunch of versions of that potion isn't helpful. And I think it's because this Game Foundations was built not with like a JRPG inventory system in mind, but for like, I don't know, probably like mobile stuff or something. It's just the way it feels. Why do I... Oh, I think that's because I stopped updating at some point because it took away more functionality that I was using. And I think the later versions of this package are more geared towards like mobile purchasing. So like you have an item in your inventory and that item is a purchase. But yeah, so I'm kind of fighting the data design or the schema or the way that this was intended to be used. Maybe that's fine though. I think there's a good chance I might want to make my own version at some point. But for the time being, this is still fine. And for what we're trying to do today, we're going a bit down the rabbit hole. Yeah, this is functional. I'm just starting to think about the future and realizing that if we ever try and use the transaction system, it's going to be adding multiple instances and we're going to run into trouble. But maybe we don't use the inventory store system. Maybe we build our own instead. And at some point, maybe we just build our own version of the data objects as well. But for the time being, I think we've encapsulated enough that we're fairly safe for when I decide to do that refactor. The next question Sorry, I'm just realizing this can be even simpler. So I don't want to have to do this call every single time we want to get the item, and I'm realizing we can still do the same setup here at this level. Like that. This feels a bit repetitive, but this is for creating an item when we know we're building it for the first time, and this is getting an item when we don't know whether or not it's been created. Okay. And I'm going to be using this one inside of our screen. So if we go back into skill, I'm going to want to see how many nodes I have. For the time being, let's just make that a single value. But eventually we're going to need to have a list of how many of these items you have if we're going to have multiple different types of skill node items. Let's figure out where the power is. Where is this? That's here. So we can copy this. And then ability spec power, ability spec name, ability spec SP. So we want another UI component. And this is going to be ability spec item count. Going to leave this somewhat generic, but we'll probably eventually have multiples of these. I'm going to add this new one here. This is going to be doing item factory, get item by ID, I guess we still do need a count. For if we ever want to display the amount of that item. So get count, and this will be returning amount in inventory. Cool. And then in here we get amount. What was the text we were showing for the previous one? It looked like we had some amount of information in front. Yeah, we had a prefix. Okay, so we want to do the same thing, I think. Cool. And now we should just be able to drag the text asset in. And it should just start updating with our new information. Add. Drag the text in. Is this going to fit? Crystal 99. Okay. Bit simplistic, but let's give this a try. We need a space. Let's ignore that for now, though. If we go back out here, then, and walk over to here, we get 2 crystal shards. If we come back to this menu, we should see that we have 2, and we don't. Interesting. And we can't purchase it. Okay. That makes sense. So the problem is we need to be using this item inventory system in our add item sequence step. So this is doing the inventory manager system. Instead, we should do item factory, create item. Item ID. This is going to give us back an item class. I don't like that this is using a external value. Again, I'm going to keep it here mostly for backwards compatibility with Heir of Embers, but we're going to make a string variation of it as well. Better. Okay, so this can create the item. The problem is we need to set the amount as well. So here we're creating the item. This just sets the definition, but we don't have a way of setting the amount. Again, this was built with the idea of like equipment in mind. I'm going to make the call of just adding a set amount for today. Whether or not that's in line with the spirit of this system, I'm not sure. Amount to add. Add this amount. Void. Hydrate redemption from unlockables, keeping me hydrated. Appreciated as always. Remembering to unmute. Okay. So we're going to say add this amount. This seems fine. It's the same call. That is the same call. Okay, cool. So now we've made it so that the increase item amount and decrease item amount are just using our internal set and get calls. And then set is handling the removal if it needs to. Get is just getting the value. Can consume is just checking to see that get value. This seems okay. Now here we're going to do item. We're going to get that item and we're going to set amount, which is going to be... Oh, I guess the problem here is this is also an increment. So this set amount isn't even correct. Technically this is a increment. Really, that's the same thing as this call. What is this one called? Increase item amount. You know what I'm going to do, actually? I think the simpler version is instead of making this public, we're going to leave this as private. And we're going to move it down just for readability for me. So set amount is something we won't have accessible, but we will have an amount which is by default equal to 1. And the same thing can be true of the decrease item amount, which is really the same function which you could just put a negative amount into, but it's fine. This code was made to be very readable, and I'm going to keep that standard of, or the higher standard that Pass Me had. So we're going to say increase amount is by default 1, so you could call this whatever parameter and it will just go up by 1. Otherwise you can give it a value and it'll go up by that amount. So we're going to increase amount by whatever we're supposed to be increasing by. This becomes public, which I think I'm okay with. because we're going to need to be able to access these things. And then we can get rid of all of this. And now we make sure things are actually connected so that both the screen and the inventory pickup stuff is using the same flow. Okay, let's try that. Magnus, welcome. I'm gonna keep the higher standard that Past Me had. Is a thought I've had many times but never put into words until now. I mean, I say it to myself all the time, but oftentimes when we're not streaming, I will be a little bit more willing to break with my past setups and just make things worse. But because I'm on camera, I've got to be a little bit more respectable. Okay, so we've got 2 crystals here. We do not have any skill points though, so this should not be purchasable even though we have 2 crystals. So if we come over here and use slash a couple of times, let's respawn that slime because it's not going to hurt us as much or at all. A little bit. Okay. And then we come into here, we now have 2 skill points and 2 crystals, so we can buy 1 point of strength. Well, that didn't work as intended. Our number of crystals went up, so cool. We also ran into... Oh, it's still complaining about not being able to find a full portrait for Hero. I should just hook that up at some point. It should be just grabbing a single image of Hero and placing it here. Okay, so why did our crystals go up? If we go back to the ability spec, I believe that is where we were actually doing the increasing and decreasing of the points. Consume, okay, consume is decreasing item amount. Get amount -1, set amount. So if the amount was 2 and we decreased it by 1, it should have been 1. How have I written this in a way that, like, okay, let's try again. We're gonna just debug it because I am not entirely sure how I've messed this up and I am not able to visualize it. Because if I get the amount is 2. I -1 from it. I'm not doing amount is equal to -1, right? No, I said amount is equal to 1. We've got 2 crystals. We got a skill point. Amount is 1. Okay, we're going down through here. We're getting the item. We're getting its amount is 2. We return 2. And then we go into here. Amount to add. Oh, it should be -1. That's how I've messed this up. Okay, well... No, that's still not right. Yeah, so this is setting the amount, but that's not what this does. That's the problem here, is that if we want this to be the set amount function, it should just be equaling to whatever the amount is, and this is not the amount to add. This is just the amount to set. Yeah, okay, cool. That makes sense. So we're getting amount, minusing it by the decrease. Amount is becoming not a word anymore. We're decreasing it and then setting it to that new value. And then here we're going to increment that value up and then setting it to whatever that new increment is. Cool. And this is an internal function that's only used here. I think this is following. And this is a positive integer because if I was to use this, I would say decrease it by 2. I would expect it to go down by 2, not decrease it by -2. Okay, cool. See, this is the problem with keeping myself to a higher standard, though, is I feel like old me thought different. And although I think on the surface this makes sense, if for some reason is baffling to me. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, let's get rid of that. Let's give this one more try. Okay, so this should be the ability to pick up the items, the ability to go over to the skill screen, and the ability to use that item to buy a node. And so now we have 2 currencies you need. You need to have skill points, and you need to have the skill node items. But eventually, I'd like to break this up into smaller, like, categories, so that, or break it up into more individual items, so that you'll need a node for strength, a node for defense, so that when you find a specific node in the world, you're like, oh, this will let me move forward on the grid, is my hope. I still think that this might just backfire and make everything feel clunky and bad, but I need something to give you in the world. Like, there's not enough items, and so we're kind of building this mechanic mostly to create something for the player to go, oh man, cool, when you find a dead end or a treasure chest, or potentially an item dropped from an enemy. Yeah, nothing's purchasable. And I still can't buy anything. Okay, cool. But if we leave and come back in, I think in theory... Oh, the chest doesn't respawn. Past me was smart. Okay, so the chest is not respawning because that cutscene has triggered. This gets into a more philosophical design question, which is, should chests respawn on the start of new runs? Which I'm not sure. Where does this actually create the flag? Because it must be generating this flag in the flag manager? Small derail here. I'm hoping this will be quick. Interactable flags. Here we create flags. Just want to check if this is not here. Is this creating a generic flag? It is. Okay, so this will just make a generic flag. So this is kind of too overarching, but this is saying for every interactable flag that we create, they reset on new runs. I don't think that's necessarily true. What's more likely is we probably want another parameter in here for whether or not this flag resets on new runs, and we can have it on a per interaction setup. So for some things we can have it so that it resets on a new run, and for others they stay between runs. And design wise, I'm not really sure what I'm leaning towards, because I can kind of see a world in which it makes sense that you've like picked up that item and it's in your inventory, so when you come back to that chest it's empty because you've already picked it up. But it might also cause problems with the designs as well. Okay, but that should have allowed us to pick up 2 now. Yeah, so at least that's, for my purposes, allowing us to get more crystals. Realistically, the next thing I want to look at though is having it so that when you fight one of these enemies, they have a chance of dropping the crystals, and that'll be a better way for us in this test space to simulate gaining new items. Yeah. We're going to take our break for dinner though. As always, we stream Sundays from 2 to 4 and then from 6 to 8 PST. We are at that cutoff of 4 PST now, so I'm going to be breaking for dinner. I'll be back in 2 hours, and I think at that point we'll look at trying to see if we can set up a way of having it so that enemies, when they die, will generate a interactable prop, which technically we already have an interactable prop, but they currently only work on map load. So there will be a little bit of fun trying to figure out how to make it so that one of these can be generated when you kill an enemy. And we kind of did something similar a couple weeks ago when we set up this system to spawn enemies, because enemies were only ever being created on map load, and we managed to get this working. So how hard could the item props be? Well, we'll find out in about 2 hours. But for now, this is going to be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.